Hi everyone, welcome to this presentation. This time we're going to be focusing on the Enlightenment, aka the Age of Reason. Please be filling out your notes as we go through this. And at various points I'm just going to stop and sort of give you guys some time to look through some of the slides as we're going to go into some information more in depth within class. But I'll make sure to point that out as we go along. Here we go. So an overview of the 18th century included a lot of changes in the peg systems that we see. We see a lot of political reform going on, different styles of government being formed. How are people going to share rights with the government and the leaders? Intellectual changes. We see the scientific revolution really creating this new sense of reason and individualism within society, people beginning to look to themselves instead of the church to be able to solve problems, greater increase in education and later greater literacy across Europe during this time, as well as a change in the economic systems going on in Europe. The origins of the Enlightenment really comes about from what we've been talking about with the scientific revolution. And the idea is that with the Renaissance and the scientific revolution, science was really sort of reinvented the way that society was going to be thinking about things, able to reason and make sense of things using mathematical formulas. And it really allowed an alternative for people to think things through themselves instead of using politics or religion to guide their thinking, said the government and the church. And it really allowed people to sort of craft their own understandings of the world around them, and really gave birth to a new era of great thinkers. Here's a good map for you to use to help you understand where some of the big famous centers of academic enlightenment were occurring. You can see all the way out here into Russia, which we'll talk about with Catherine the Great. We see in Scandinavia and all throughout Western Europe here. Here, this is a good map also to help you understand the religious breakdown of the area as well. But you can see how quickly this spread all across Europe very quickly. So there's a variety of different characteristics of the Enlightenment that I'm going to go through. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, but feel free to pause and read through them if it helps you with some of the questions that you need to answer. We've talked about this idea of rationalism, people beginning to reason through things, and this change in cosmology, this new concept of man and what our place is on Earth, this being this new sense of a purpose that we find within ourselves. The church is no longer sort of giving us that understanding. We create that for ourselves. We talk a lot about this new push towards secularism. People are not just abiding by the church's rule and staying as religious and attached to the church. With this new push of Protestantism and different forms of Christianity, we see a push towards the more secular ideas of science, especially with the scientific revolution, greater secularism within Europe. We've talked about the scientific method, utilitarianism, which is providing the greatest good for the greatest number of people. So we talk about feudalism, which would be more of the opposite of this concept, where the power lies with the fewest and not with the greater. That now we see the greater the population has the greatest good. What can we do for everyone versus what can we do for the some? Tolerance. We're seeing a greater push of, especially religious tolerance, of different people who believe in different ideas, particularly within Christianity, but also could be spreading to other religions as well, that no opinion is worth burning your neighbor for. Optimism and self-confidence, we see lots of changes there, different freedoms. Again, I mentioned education of the masses, as we continue to see people evolving over time. A lot of changes in the political system, due process, and the way that we do our justice system and punishments. We see greater changes in constitutionalism, with the rights of citizens and people. You're going to see a lot of different political thinkers during this time look to change the way in which we structure a government, who is in charge of that, and how does that work? How do we provide a balance of rights for the people as well as security from the government? So we'll see a lot of that going on during the Enlightenment. Okay, I'm going to go through these next few slides rather quickly, where I'm just going to pause and allow you to read through some of them, make sense of them, and begin to answer some of those questions in your notes. We will talk more in depth about a lot of these different Enlightenment thinkers, but I want you, for now, just to go through the video, read through some of the slides, make sense of who these individuals are, and then begin to answer some of the questions. So this idea of the philosoph, it's not really original thinkers as a whole, but they were great publicists of this new thinking of change and progress, that they were found new ways to publish their new thinking, new ideas, bring them into the light for people to be able to see them. And they were really students of society who analyzed its evils and looked to push for advanced reforms, including Hobbes and Locke and other ones that you'll see now. There were also women who were really big in the Enlightenment period, including Mary Wollstonecraft, who was really influential in sort of pushing this new era of women becoming political thinkers as well. A lot of the men who were the Enlightenment thinkers, while they looked for a lot of reform within society, really kept pretty conservative views of women during this time, and it didn't allow for women to really find their place. A lot of it was that women couldn't get a good education, women stayed in the home, etc. So Mary and several others were really big about pushing and challenging the men's views and urging women to work in male-dominant fields and sort of really expand their thinking with mathematics and science, etc. This is a good graph for you of what we've seen so far. We didn't really talk about Beccaria all that much, but you can see a lot of impact, especially within the United States, a lot of impact of a lot of these different ideas from the Enlightenment. That the United States, as you learn in U.S. history, really took a lot of these different ideas from the Enlightenment and sort of as a revolutionary idea. And that's not really something new, considering that our ancestors came from Europe. Catherine the Great, as we mentioned before, she ruled Russia for a long time, and she looked to reform Russian law using Enlightenment thinkers like Montesquieu and Rousseau, etc. And so her views were that she was able to change a little bit of reform within Russia, but there was quite a revolt of serfdom against her, which might surprise you, considering that you would think that Enlightenment would help those people. But the way that she did her reforms really didn't do much for that group, and so it really changed the way that she saw the Enlightenment. But nevertheless, her influence within Russia to try and use the Enlightenment shows just how influential it was and how vast and expansive that the Enlightenment became. What was the legacy? I'm going to pause on this slide for just a moment for you to be able to see the greater legacy of the Enlightenment overall. We'll talk more in depth about this idea as we go through, but these ideas should be pretty straightforward for you guys to understand. If you have any questions, make sure to put them into the interactive guide before class, and hope you enjoyed this. Feel free to pause at any point, go back, read through some of them, but we will also go through them more in depth in class. Hope you enjoyed. See you in class.